In a feel-good Rebirth novel, there exists a seemingly minor canon fodder character. Tang Cheng, who once schemed to marry her beloved prince, suddenly finds herself engaged to the heir of the Duke of Zhenguo, a man known for his difficulty in fathering children. But just 1 month later, she becomes pregnant. And that is where a heartwarming and unexpected love story begins. But in this story, Tang Cheng is no longer the blind canon fodder. She is a transmigrator from an interstellar empire, unaware of the tragic fate the original character once faced. When handed a dark vial of abortion medicine, she simply smiles, throws it away, and vows to protect the little life within her. When Huayan, the heir admired by countless noble ladies, now stands beside Tang Cheng, a man once believed to be childless, finds his destiny changed by a woman who brings him miracles. From a marriage of schemes grows a family envied by the world. This is the journey from canon fodder to the true mistress of happiness. A tale filled with warmth and unexpected turns. You're listening to the story on Galaxxy romance novel. If you enjoy it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss the next chapters. In the main courtyard, a maid dressed in green hurriedly entered and reported, "Madam, the fourth miss has arrived." Madame Zhang immediately responded, "Let her in." The Duchess of Zhenguo, Madame Min, leisurely set down her teacup. She had yet to meet the so-called fourth miss of the Tang family. However, recalling how her son had seemed utterly bewitched the night before, repeatedly insisting to the Duke that his improved health was entirely thanks to the strengthening tonic fourth Miss Tang had provided, her gaze turned cold. As if that weren't enough, her son had even prepared a generous gift for this Tang girl. Who would have thought that a foolish, ignorant, and notoriously spoiled young woman could possess such bewitching tricks? Moments later, Tang Cheng entered the room, accompanied by 4 maids. The Duchess raised her eyes, scrutinizing Tang Cheng with a critical gaze. Her eyes swept over the young woman from head to toe, lingering briefly before repeating the motion. Tang Cheng was dressed in a vibrant red silk gown today. Her delicate features, snow-like complexion, and fiery presence were impossible to ignore. With her finely sculpted chin slightly raised, she exuded a subtle arrogance that was unmistakable in her brows and posture. What a bold and dazzling young lady! She was nothing like the rumors described, a vain, foolish, and clueless fourth miss of the Nanyang Marquisate. The Duchess continued to observe her intently, unable to resist comparing Tang Cheng to her own carefully cultivated Xuening. Much to her disbelief, the Tang family's so-called good-for-nothing illegitimate daughter outshone her own Xuening in every way. Madame Min found herself stunned, unable to accept the comparison. As soon as Tang Cheng entered, she gave a slight nod to Madame Zhang, the wife of the Nanyang Marquis, before turning her gaze to the elegantly dressed woman sitting beside her. Without needing an introduction, Tang Cheng instantly recognized her as the Duchess of Zhenguo. Raising her brows slightly, Tang Cheng went straight to the point. "I heard the Duchess is here to discuss the annulment of the engagement?" In the original host's memory, there had never been any bowing or formal greetings given to Madame Zhang, and Tang Cheng certainly didn't plan to kneel or curtsy either. A polite nod was more than sufficient. If someone's status and position truly warranted it, Tang Cheng could show respect when necessary. As for the Duchess of Zhenguo, the mother of her so-called fiancé, Tang Cheng had no intention of currying favor with her. After all, the purpose of this meeting was to dissolve the engagement. They were unlikely to remain connected as family in the future, and Tang Cheng had no desire to humiliate herself by acting subservient. Even if the engagement hadn't been called off, she still wouldn't go out of her way to please this woman. At most, she would remain polite and cordial. There were plenty of good men in the world. She didn't need one Huayan. Still, the Duchess of Zhenguo was undeniably stunning, a woman of extraordinary beauty and grace. It wasn't surprising that the Duchess's son was so exceptionally handsome. Unfortunately, her child's father, as she thought of him, was nothing more than an ungrateful wolf in sheep's clothing. Taking advantage and then trying to burn the bridge? Not happening. Tang Cheng was furious, and the consequences were bound to be severe. Madame Zhang, accustomed to Tang Cheng's unrestrained behavior, simply lowered her head and quietly sipped her tea, adopting an air of detachment. Teach the fourth miss a lesson? Impossible. Her days were currently comfortable and carefree, and she had no intention of stirring up trouble. The Duchess of Zhenguo's face darkened the moment Tang Cheng walked in without offering a proper greeting and began speaking as if she were interrogating her. So it was true. This fourth miss of the Tang family was as arrogant and unruly as the rumors claimed. The Duchess's decision was clearly justified. How could someone so lacking in virtue, talent, and basic etiquette deserve to overshadow Xuening? She wouldn't even consider allowing such a person to become her son's concubine, let alone his wife. Does the fourth miss agree to the annulment? The Duchess's tone was equally blunt, her voice laced with cold indifference and a barely concealed hint of disdain. Tang Cheng cast a sidelong glance at the high and mighty Duchess of Zhenguo before leisurely seating herself in a chair. Her four maids stood behind her in perfect formation, with Linglong skilled in martial arts and Hoopa, proficient in medicine, positioned closest to her. Hoopa, ever perceptive, quickly poured tea and handed it to Tang Cheng. "Miss, please have some tea." Tang Cheng accepted the teacup and took a small sip. Humph, as if she hadn't noticed the deeply hidden disdain in the Duchess of Zhenguo's eyes. When dealing with someone who clearly despises you, there's no need to save face for them. Tang Cheng, spoiled and pampered her whole life, had always acted with a carefree, even willful attitude. So, she decided not to bother with pleasantries. Madame Zhang's lips twitched slightly. That temper of the fourth miss had clearly not changed one bit. But as Madame Zhang observed the Duchess's darkening expression after being blatantly snubbed by the brazen fourth miss, her own sour mood suddenly lifted. The other servants in the hall. The Duchess of Zhenguo's expression darkened as she watched Tang Cheng behave so nonchalantly, completely disregarding her status as the esteemed Duchess. What an ill-mannered girl. Madame Tang, the upbringing of your Nanyang Marquise is truly disappointing. Madame Zhang's lips twitched slightly. Duchess, it wouldn't be fair to judge the entire household. The fourth miss is the Marquis's pride and joy, and I've never been allowed to interfere. In other words, Tang Cheng's behavior was entirely the result of the Marquis's indulgence, and Madame Zhang had no intention of taking the blame. The Duchess felt her breath catch in her chest, utterly stifled. The Madame of the Nanyang Marquise was truly spineless, allowing an illegitimate daughter to run wild and act so arrogantly. Tang Cheng, hearing the remark, raised an eyebrow and responded with a sneer. How utterly laughable. A person who is ungrateful and tears down bridges after crossing them dares to call me ill-mannered? That's the biggest joke of the century. Tang Cheng was never one to take things lying down. Having been accused of being ill-mannered, there was no way she would let it slide. She immediately retorted, sharp and relentless. Did they think she was a sickly kitten just because the tiger hadn't shown its claws? The Duchess of Zhenguo clearly looked down on her, even after Tang Cheng had generously used the strengthening elixir on Wen Huaiyan. The fact that she hadn't exploded on the spot was already a testament to her self-control. Madame Zhang was utterly stunned. Since when was the fourth miss so quick-witted and eloquent? Wasn't she supposed to be brainless and uneducated? Madame Zhang suddenly felt as though she'd been deceived. Her gaze toward Tang Cheng now carried a hint of curiosity and re-evaluation. The Duchess of Zhenguo, accustomed to being treated with respect and deference, so much so that even the Empress herself would grant her some face, found herself openly humiliated for the first time, making her expression turned ashen with fury. Such nonsense! Dragging up accusations of ingratitude and betrayal just to argue over an annulment. Utterly absurd. Whether the fourth miss agrees or not, the engagement is officially annulled. The Zhenguo ducal household will not reconsider. She fixed Tang Cheng with a frosty glare. And let me offer you some advice, fourth miss. A woman should embody virtue, respect propriety, honor her elders, and abide by the rules. Someone as defiant, disrespectful, and utterly devoid of talent and character as you, the Zhenguo ducal household cannot, and will not, tolerate. Tang Cheng sipped her tea leisurely, twirling the delicate teacup in her hand as the Duchess of Zhenguo twisted her words, berated and scolded her. When the tirade finally ended, Tang Cheng let out a soft scoff, lifting her chin slightly. Duchess, do you think I'm so desperate to marry into your Zhenguo ducal household? It's not like I had a choice. Fate is such a funny thing, isn't it? After all, I'm carrying your grandson in my belly. Ah, the wonders of destiny. Her words were so outrageous that the Duchess nearly spat blood. How could there be someone so shameless in this world? Oh, and by the way, when I mentioned ingratitude and burning bridges, I wasn't talking about the annulment itself. Surely, Duchess, you know what I mean. I can't believe Wen Huaiyan didn't share the good news about his miraculous recovery with you. As for the annulment, I don't mind. Go ahead and annul it. That way, I can find a stepfather for the child in my belly. Tang Cheng smiled sweetly, as if this were all just a trivial matter, her tone entirely carefree. Out with the old, in with the new. The Duchess's mind buzzed as an absurd thought suddenly struck her. Could her son's miraculous recovery really have something to do with the fourth Miss Tang? How was that even possible? The Duchess of Zhenguo outright refused to believe it. Who didn't know that the so-called strengthening elixir was nothing more than a sham concocted by the Marquis of Nanyang and the old physician from Jiha Hall? Tang Cheng, however, wasn't about to let the matter rest. With a sharp turn in her tone, she set the teacup down on the table with a loud clink. Before we finalize the annulment, let's settle a little score first, she said, her voice calm but brimming with authority. I'm the type of person who clearly distinguishes between gratitude and grievances. When I've done someone a favor, I must collect repayment. Otherwise, it weighs on my mind and disrupts my mood. Madame Zhang. The four maids. The hall fell into utter silence. Tang Cheng's brazen attitude as she openly demanded repayment from the Duchess of Zhenguo left everyone stunned. It was as if they were seeing a completely different Tang Cheng, eloquent, sharp, and brimming with an unyielding confidence. The Duchess's face turned an unmistakable shade of green, her anger boiling to the surface. She let out a sharp laugh, her voice dripping with mockery. Absurd. I wasn't aware that the Zhenguo ducal household owed the fourth Miss Tang any debt of gratitude. If you think that by using the child in your belly as leverage, you can extort benefits, under the delusion that you're some great benefactor ensuring the continuation of our family line, then you've grossly miscalculated. The Zhenguo ducal household has no need for the meat you're carrying. Enough of this nonsense. Madame Tang, bring me the gung tai and the marriage contract. Let's finalize the annulment. The Duchess had no intention of lingering a second longer. She was afraid Tang Cheng might genuinely infuriate her to death. Most importantly, her visit to annul the marriage had been carried out in secret, without the knowledge of the Duke or her son, Wen Huaiyan. Delays lead to complications. Judging by fourth Miss Tang's indifferent attitude toward marrying into the Zhenguo ducal household, she was probably still fixated on the fourth prince. Once the engagement was annulled, there was a good chance she'd resume pestering him as she had before. Hadn't she been clamoring about wanting to abort the child just days ago? If not for the Duke's insistence on keeping his grandchild, she would never have forced herself to tolerate this arrogant and brainless girl. But now, finally, she no longer had to endure it. Once the annulment was finalized, she would write to the Xie family and invite Xuanning to stay in the capital for a while, giving her son ample opportunity to grow closer to her. Madame Zhang. Cough cough. My apologies, Duchess, but the marriage contract and young Master Wen's gung tai are in the Marquis's possession. What? The Duchess of Zhenguo was completely stunned, her expression a mix of disbelief. The marriage contract and gung tai were both in the hands of the Marquis of Nanyang. How could she possibly annul the marriage now? It seemed today's efforts would be in vain. If she missed this opportunity, once the Duke and the Marquis got involved, annulling the marriage would become much more difficult. The Duchess's face darkened in frustration. Madame Zhang suppressed the slight curl of her lips, making sure not to show that she had intentionally waited until now to reveal this information. Tang Cheng, unfazed by the Duchess's shocked and unpleasant expression, calmly took another sip of tea. Duchess, don't rush it. You can't eat hot tofu in a hurry. The gung tai and marriage contract are in my hands. After we settle the accounts, I'll give them to you. Now let me explain things clearly. After a brief pause, Tang Cheng added with a confident smile. Don't worry. As soon as everything between the Zhenguo ducal household and I is cleared up, I won't go back on my word. A person as outstanding as me will never struggle to find a match. I won't cling to Wen Huaiyan. She had already subtly warned the Duchess that she twisted her words, always bringing up the child in her belly to skew her intentions. Tang Cheng was furious. Meanwhile, the surprise had come too quickly, and the Duchess of Zhenguo was almost caught off guard. Faced with someone like Tang Cheng, who had no regard for face or reputation and was doted on by the Marquis of Nanyang, She was at a loss. She was afraid that the fourth Miss Tang would deliberately hold onto the betrothal documents and refuse to annul the engagement. In the span of a breath, the Duchess suppressed the wild joy in her heart and calmed down. Speak. She wanted to see just how far Miss Tang would go in her unreasonable demands and claims of gratitude. Madame Zhang, like everyone else, was curious about what kind of favor Tang Cheng, who was always fond of stirring up trouble, wanted from the Duke of Zhenguo's household. Only the four maids remained composed. The young lady had done a great favor for young Master One. As everyone eagerly waited for Tang Cheng to reveal the secret, she lazily leaned back in her chair and ordered her maid to massage her shoulders. Zhenju, my shoulders feel a bit sore. Give me a massage. Yes, miss. Zhenju quickly stepped forward and skillfully began massaging Tang Cheng's shoulders. Miss, should I give your legs a rub as well? Shanhu suddenly suggested. Sure. Tang Cheng shot Shanhu an approving glance. Not bad, this Shanhu. Without a word, Linglong brought over another Wangwali wooden chair. Miss, resting your legs on the chair will be more comfortable. Tang Cheng gave Linglong a satisfied look as well. Linglong had good instincts too. Miss, allow me to help relieve your fatigue, Hoopa offered, unwilling to be left behind as she stepped forward to massage the acupoints on either side of Tang Cheng's forehead. Tang Cheng's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Each of her four maids carried out their respective duties, ensuring her complete comfort. The room fell into stunned silence. Everyone watched in disbelief as Tang Cheng, in the midst of such a tense confrontation, acted like a spoiled young lady, indulging in luxury as if she had all the time in the world. Madame Zhang's lips twitched. Here she goes again. Glancing at the Duchess's darkened face, taut with restrained fury, Madame Zhang felt a rare flicker of sympathy. She'll get used to it. If the fourth miss weren't stirring up trouble, that would be more unusual. The Duchess was livid, but with the Nanyang Marchioness proving utterly spineless, she had no choice but to endure it. Tang Cheng let her stew just long enough, about the time it took to finish a cup of tea, before finally speaking again. Still enjoying her maid's attentive care, she said lazily, I won't harp on my reputation, it's meaningless to you anyway. In your eyes I lost my name long ago. A simple word is all it takes to dissolve this engagement, and everyone will simply say I brought it upon myself. Get to the point. The Duchess of Zhenguo finally lost her patience and cut off Tang Cheng's carefully crafted opening. Tang Cheng glanced at the impatient Duchess and let out a soft scoff. So impatient. Fine, let's get straight to business. When Wen Huaiyan returned home yesterday, you must have heard the news of his miraculous recovery, right? As the one who cured him with the strengthening elixir, it's only fair that I receive my due compensation. Well said, miss. You've always been the one taking advantage of others, never on the losing end. Now that young Master One is calling off the engagement, he's just an outsider. This is the perfect time to settle accounts. While massaging her mistress's legs, Shanhu chimed in with an approving nod. The room fell silent. Tang Cheng found herself quite pleased with the newly appointed Shanhu. She decided to double her monthly salary. Wen Huaiyan clearly promised me a generous reward yesterday, yet today, the Duchess rushes over to annul the engagement. This is the very definition of burning bridges and repaying kindness with betrayal. I'm someone who prefers clear transactions. 1,000 taels of gold. And with that, our dealings will be settled. The marriage contract and betrothal documents will be yours. Tang Cheng raised a slender, fair finger, her expression a perfect mix of reluctance and grievance. In an era where strengthening medicine was worth a fortune, she was only asking for a mere 1,000 taels of gold, an absolute loss on her part. Tang Cheng felt utterly wronged, but what could she do? He was, after all, the father of her child. If not for his sake, then at least for the child's. 1,000 taels of gold amounted to 10,000 taels of silver. The fourth miss was asking for a fortune. The tension in the hall was palpable, as the assembled guests, unaware of the underlying situation, took sharp intakes of breath. Madame Zhang, her face frozen in disbelief, nearly dropped the teacup in her hand. The audacity of Tang Cheng's demand had left her stunned, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. The four maidservants exchanged troubled glances. They knew the miraculous effects of the strengthening elixir, and in their eyes, The price of 1,000 taels of gold seemed far too low given the value of the medicine. It was a bargain in their estimation, but it was clear that others didn't share the same perspective. 1,000 taels of gold? Tang Cheng, you have an insatiable appetite. You dare to extort the Duke's residence? Who doesn't know that the strengthening elixir is nothing but a scam? The Duchess's voice was filled with fury, her eyes flashing with disdain. Tang Cheng straightened up in her seat, her large almond-shaped eyes narrowing with a sharp glint. Her expression hardened, the previous feigned innocence replaced by a more confrontational look. "Are you planning to go back on your word, Duchess?" she asked, her tone cutting through the tension like a blade. She had already lowered her price and played the role of the wronged party, but to be refused even 1,000 taels of gold felt like a slap in the face. It was more than just a transaction now, it was an insult. Her patience was running thin. The Duchess, clearly flustered by Tang Cheng's defiance, tried to mask her irritation with a cold, biting remark. "Tang Cheng, don't be too greedy. Be careful or you might find yourself with nothing at all." Her words only served to stoke the fire in Tang Cheng's eyes. She wasn't about to back down now. The Duchess's gaze turned icy as she glared at Tang Cheng, her tone dripping with barely contained anger and a veiled warning. But Tang Cheng, far from intimidated, remained unfazed. She found it almost laughable that the Duchess was quibbling over a mere 1,000 taels of gold. For someone in her position, it was a paltry sum, and her lack of willingness to negotiate only spoke volumes about her insincerity. 1,000 taels of gold is already a concession, Tang Cheng said with a lazy smile, still enjoying her massage. "I'm only asking this much because of the child you're so eager to claim as your grandchild. Don't be too greedy. If you're unwilling to pay, then by all means don't bother with the marriage cancellation. I really don't care." Her tone was casual, almost bored, as though the whole situation was beneath her. To her, whether there was an engagement or not, it didn't change anything. It wasn't her who was desperate. She wasn't the same as her predecessor. Unlike the former, naive version of herself, she had learned to read between the lines. The Duchess's urgency to sever the engagement suggested there was more going on beneath the surface, something hidden that she had yet to uncover. Perhaps the child's father, the man who was supposed to be her fiancé, wasn't even aware of his mother's sudden decision. If he knew, she'd have demanded a far higher price, at least 10 times more than what she was asking now. For a powerful and deeply rooted family like the Duke of Zhenguo's household, a mere 1,000 taels of gold was nothing more than a drop in the ocean. Yet the Duchess was being unbelievably stingy. She couldn't even part with 1,000 taels. You. The Duchess was so enraged by Tang Cheng's shameless attitude that she was practically fuming from every orifice. "Madame Zhang. This girl could drive anyone to their grave." Everyone silently awaited the Duchess's reaction, even the servants and attendants she had brought along, who had otherwise remained invisible until now. After a brief but tense silence, the Duchess, face dark with barely suppressed fury, gritted her teeth and gave in. "Fine. I'll pay." The Duchess wasted no time and promptly sent someone back to fetch the banknotes. Tang Cheng, equally efficient, instructed Pearl to retrieve the marriage contract and Wen Huayan's birth certificate from the peony garden. It would be a straightforward exchange, the banknotes for the documents, and of course the 2 nursemaids. Once the engagement was annulled, the 2 nursemaids would no longer remain at the Marquis residence, which left Tang Cheng feeling a bit regretful. She made a mental note to inform her father, the Marquis, about this later. 1 instant stick later. "Miss, the banknotes are all in order." Satisfied, Tang Cheng took the banknotes and with a beaming smile, handed the marriage contract and birth certificate to the Duchess. "Pleasure doing business with you," she said with a sweet grin. "Take care and don't let the door hit you on the way out. Oh, by the way, my apologies for sharing some bad news, Madame Min. While Wen Huayan's health has improved, his issue with having children hasn't been resolved or improved in the slightest. Madame Zhang. Everyone else." With the marriage officially annulled, Madame Min heaved a sigh of relief. She couldn't be bothered to entertain Tang Cheng's provocative words. Clutching the marriage certificate and Wen Huayan's gung tai, she didn't spare Tang Cheng another glance and left with her entourage. She needed to rush to the Yamen to destroy the backup copy of the marriage contract. At that moment, No one knew that because of Chun Momo had accidentally slipped the news in front of Tang Cheng, the news of the Duchess's visit to annul the engagement had quickly spread throughout the capital. At the Duke of Zhenguo's residence, when Wen Huaiyan learned of the news, his expression darkened. Without a moment's hesitation, he prepared his horse and hurried to the Nanyang Marquis's residence. Unfortunately, he was a step too late. Just as Wen Huaiyan arrived at the Nanyang Marquis's residence, the Duchess had already left for the Yamen to destroy the registered copy of the marriage contract. Tang Cheng glanced at the dashing young man before her, who had clearly rushed over in such haste that he looked slightly disheveled. She couldn't help but feel a hint of regret, just a tiny bit. "You're too late," she said with a faint smile. "Our engagement has been annulled." A gentle spring breeze brushed past, and the sunlight was warm. Wen Huaiyan's strikingly handsome face was taut. His fists clenched at his sides as he stood in silence for a long moment before finally forcing out a strained sentence. "The annulment wasn't my decision." "I know." Tang Cheng, completely unfazed, picked up a piece of pastry and took a bite. Wen Huaiyan's back stiffened instantly. His lips pressed into a thin line, his chest rising and falling subtly. He closed his eyes for a brief moment before opening them again. "If you knew, then why did you agree to it?" With the engagement broken, his future child's status would become neither legitimate nor illegitimate, leaving them in an awkward predicament. They could have had a noble birth. Just one step too late. Just one step. Everything had settled. Tang Cheng gave Wen Huaiyan a puzzled look, unable to follow his logic. "Forcing something that isn't meant to be never ends well. There's no love between us and your mother doesn't like me." She was adamant about calling off the engagement. "I respect my elders, so I agreed." Respecting elders? The four maids twitched at the corners of their mouths, remembering how their mistress had strutted around, completely unfazed in front of the Duchess, but they wisely chose to remain silent. "Oh, and I took 1,000 taels of gold. Honestly, your mother was being a bit stingy. She didn't even want to part with a single coin at first. Thought she could call off the engagement with just a few words. Your noble household is wealthy beyond measure. Surely this small sum isn't an issue? Or does she think the strengthening elixir isn't worth the price?" Perhaps the Duchess feared delays would complicate things. She didn't think too hard before agreeing, which just goes to show how determined she was to end the engagement. The four maids lowered their heads. "Are you sure Miss isn't just adding fuel to the fire with that remark?" Poor young Master One. That said, Mrs. Decision made perfect sense. There was no love between them, and basing a marriage on a child that hadn't even been born yet was unreliable at best. The Duchess had come in with overwhelming force, determined to break the engagement. Miss, who had always been cherished and protected by the Marquis, would never lower herself just for the sake of a child and cling desperately to the Duke's household. If she compromised once, she would have to do it again and again. What a miserable way to live. And Miss was not someone who could endure grievances. Wen Huaiyan's handsome face darkened completely. His fists clenched tight, frustration lodging in his chest. A flicker of helplessness flashed deep in his eyes. Back when their unexpected encounter was exposed, Tang Cheng, already burdened with a tarnished reputation as a concubine-born daughter, was left with no choice but to become his concubine. His father, the Duke, had reluctantly agreed, while his mother had remained indifferent. But a few days ago, when Tang Cheng was discovered to be pregnant, the Marquis of Nanyang had insisted she be made his fiancée, and that was when his mother's attitude shifted. He knew his father had privately reprimanded her multiple times, just as he knew that she had always wanted to match him with his cousin, Xie Xuening. After his aunt's passing, his mother had showered Xie Xuening with unwavering affection, treating her like a daughter. Every year without fail, she would send someone to bring her from Jinling to stay at the Duke's residence for a time. His cousin had been fine as a child, but as she grew older, emboldened by his mother's indulgence, she began to see herself as the future lady of the Duke's household. Worse still, she grew close to certain relatives who harbored ulterior motives and ambitions of their own. It was only natural for people to have their own preferences and loyalties, but his mother had gone too far. His uncles had been eyeing his father's title for years, and from childhood to adulthood, he had endured countless schemes and attacks. Yet his mother maintained close ties with those very families, frequently inviting his cousins to the estate as if they were nothing more than friendly visitors. No matter how many times his father reprimanded her, it was useless. In the end, he had no choice but to assign more guards to protect him. Had his uncles been his father's full-blooded brothers, the situation might have been different. But his father was the legitimate heir, while the others were all born of concubines. Their relationship had been strained from the start, and his mother's actions had only deepened his disappointment. Over time, the rift between his parents had widened, their marriage reduced to little more than cold, distant civility. A few days ago, when his mother suddenly showed great concern for Tang Cheng's unborn child, going so far as to personally send 2 experienced matrons to care for her, he and his father had both thought she had finally come to her senses. But now it was clear she hadn't. He had already explained himself multiple times yesterday, even going so far as to summon imperial physicians to confirm that his difficulties in producing heirs had not been resolved. Yet his mother refused to believe him, convinced he had conspired with the physicians to deceive her. Did she truly not believe him? Or was there another reason? When Huayan's gaze darkened, noticing his expression, Tang Cheng stood up and patted his shoulder in a rare show of comfort. Even if the engagement is broken, you're still the father of this child. Don't worry. I'll make sure to give birth safely. With that, she poured him a cup of tea herself. Sit down, have some tea and relax. When Huayan collected his thoughts, took the teacup and sat across from her. His face remained stiff and unreadable. He had no desire to talk. Tang Cheng propped her chin on her hand, lazily studying his face before asking with curiosity, "What were you thinking just now? Your expression was awful. You're not upset about the broken engagement, are you? Look at me. I'm the one who got dumped and I'm perfectly calm. Not a care in the world. Meanwhile, you, a grown man, are sitting here sulking. If anything, I'm the one who should be upset. Do you know how many people outside are laughing at me right now?" She took another bite of her pastry, savoring it as if none of this concerned her in the slightest. When Huayan glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. Calm? No, she was just utterly shameless. He took a deep breath. Tang Cheng, let's get engaged again. Their previous engagement had been forced upon them by their families, solely for the sake of the child. Back then, Tang Cheng had kicked up a storm, refusing it no matter what, when Huayan hadn't cared much before. But now things were different. This heartless little troublemaker kept saying she'd find a stepfather for his child. Worse, knowing her, she might actually go through with it, maybe even a whole string of them. The mere thought made his stomach churn. For the sake of the child, he decided it was best to keep Tang Cheng tied to his side. Better she cause trouble for him alone than wreak havoc elsewhere. The 4 maids' eyes widened in shock. What was going on? The young master wanted to reinstate the engagement? This didn't seem like a bad idea. Why should we get engaged again? Tang Cheng asked with a bright smile. I think things are perfect as they are. No engagement tying us down, you don't have to restrain yourself from seeing other women, and I can happily let my father gather information on all the outstanding young men out there. A win-win situation. To hell with her so-called win-win situation. She was the only one winning here. When Huayan's handsome face darkened, a frigid aura rolling off him in waves. He could practically see a vast green prairie stretching across his head. A vision so unsettling it made his stomach twist. Suppressing the inexplicable discomfort gnawing at him, he forced himself to remain calm and laid out the pros and cons for Tang Cheng. Tang Cheng, you may not care about your reputation or the gossip outside, but have you considered how awkward and lowly our child's status will be once they're born without this engagement? Unless, of course, you're planning to get rid of the baby. His grip on the teacup tightened at the mere thought. Tang Cheng's eyes widened in shock. Why would I ever do that? In her past life, with a fertility score of 0, she had desperately wished for a child of her own. Now that she finally had one, the idea of aborting it was unthinkable. Her anger flared. Do you really want our child to grow up under other people's scorn and ridicule, being pointed at wherever they go? When Huayan's brows furrowed deeply, his voice tense. Tang Cheng's almond-shaped eyes widened, a sharp glint flashing across her delicate face. Who dares to speak ill of my child? Status crumbles in the face of absolute strength. With her enhanced physique and combat skills, her child was bound to be a powerhouse. a future general at the very least earning their place through sheer ability. As she finished speaking, her slender, fair hand slammed down on the table. Crack! Several deep fissures split across the wooden surface. When Huaiyan, the four maids stood frozen, swallowing hard. Miss had turned into a brute. My strength is still far from ideal, but I've already asked father to collect martial arts manuals for me. Once I've given birth, I'll start training. Tang Cheng frowned at the table, clearly dissatisfied that it had only cracked instead of shattering. And her hand hurt. She endured it. Still too weak. When Huaiyan's eyelid twitched. Why would a noble young lady from a marquis household train in martial arts? She already caused enough trouble without any combat skills. If she actually gained strength, wouldn't she be unstoppable? Just the thought gave him a headache. Tang Cheng subtly rubbed her sore hand and replied with unwavering confidence. Obviously, so I won't be bullied. More importantly, she wasn't used to feeling weak. It made her feel unsafe. The four maids. When Huaiyan choked on his words, then suddenly caught the small motion of her rubbing her hand. A memory surfaced. Tang Cheng had once been so terrified of pain that, even when she wanted to abort the child, she had chosen bitter, unbearable medicine rather than risk a fall. She was delicate and afraid of suffering. A plan formed in his mind. Tang Cheng martial arts training is exhausting, painful, and comes with a high risk of injury. Are you sure you can handle it? Tang Cheng froze for a moment, hesitation flickering across her delicate, beautiful face. Training in physical combat was indeed grueling. Tang Cheng, like the original host of this body, was actually quite delicate and afraid of pain. In her past life, she had relied on potions to boost her physical abilities, making her strength rather hollow. Unfortunately, she had no knowledge of how to craft those high-level potions herself. That shortcut was gone. After some thought, Tang Cheng realized that noble ladies in this era were all pampered and frail. Given her current strength, she should be more than capable of handling most situations. With that in mind, she let go of her hesitation. Forget it. I've already missed the prime age for martial arts training. Even if I try now, I won't achieve much, so there's no point in struggling. I'll just have my child learn instead. At least that way, I can fulfill my dream through them. Hearing her come up with an excuse to abandon the idea, when Huaiyan smirked silently and took a sip of tea, feeling rather pleased. Tang Cheng, my health has fully recovered now. Father is planning to arrange a position for me at the Ministry of War. I'll make time to visit you and the child as often as I can. He had to keep a close eye on her. Otherwise, who knew when she'd try to find his child a stepfather? It would be best if they could get engaged again. When Huaiyan was certain there wouldn't be any obstacles on his end. With his father's support, his mother wouldn't be able to oppose it. But Tang Cheng was unwilling. Feeling frustrated and helpless, when Huaiyan had no choice but to take a more roundabout approach, interfering with her efforts to harm other promising young men. We're no longer engaged. Even if you're the child's father, you should try to keep your distance. Otherwise, it'll affect how these outstanding young men see me, and that wouldn't be good. Tang Cheng looked at him with blatant distaste. When Huaiyan's handsome face darkened instantly, he never imagined there would come a day when he, the heir of the Duke of Zhenguo's household, would be openly despised. And by her of all people, an arrogant troublemaker with a terrible reputation. The four maidservants. Just then, a maid came in to report that Tang Cheng had arrived. Tang Cheng frowned, clearly displeased. What is she doing here? I'm busy, I don't want to see her. But before she could refuse properly, Tang Cheng barged in with her maid in tow. Tang Cheng's sudden intrusion left Tang Cheng displeased. Peony Garden was her territory, and Tang Cheng barging in so casually was nothing short of blatant disrespect. Her beautiful face was clouded with frustration. She was furious. Tang Cheng, what are you doing here? You're not welcome. Tang Cheng had arrived in high spirits, but she hadn't expected her fourth sister to outright dismiss her in front of young Master One. Embarrassed and indignant, her face flushed red. But Tang Cheng wasn't one to back down easily. She had carefully dressed up for this occasion, her goal crystal clear. She was here for her beloved young Master One. There was no way she would leave so easily. Fourth sister, didn't you say you wanted the tricolor peony I cultivated? I've brought it for you. Tang Cheng took a deep breath and lifted her lips into a gentle smile. Her voice was soft and composed as she stated her purpose. After speaking, she gestured for Jin Shu to present the potted tricolor peony from the basket. Displaying her exceptional gardening skills in front of Wen Huaiyan was another of her objectives. She had deliberately emphasized that this rare tricolor peony was her own creation. Peonies symbolized wealth and prosperity, making them highly favored among noble ladies. If she showcased this unique talent, she would surely gain admiration from many. Wen Huaiyan was a refined nobleman surely. He too appreciated rare and exquisite flora. As expected, she caught a glimpse of astonishment flickering in his eyes, a mix of admiration and surprise. A hint of pride welled up within Tang Cheng. The tricolor peony was indeed stunning. Shades of pink, yellow and blue blended harmoniously, its layered petals rich in color and vibrancy, instantly capturing everyone's attention. Wen Huaiyan was no exception. Except for Tang Cheng, she had seen countless rare and exquisite flowers. This so-called tricolor peony was nothing special in her eyes. After a quick glance, she lost interest and instead searched through the original host's memories. Finally, she unearthed the details from the recesses of her mind. Tang Cheng hadn't lied. The original host had indeed asked for a tricolor peony. It happened on the very morning Tang Cheng first arrived in this world. The original host had a deep fondness for peonies, and upon hearing that Tang Cheng had cultivated a never-before-seen tricolor variety, she had eagerly sent someone to request it. After taking over this body, Tang Cheng had completely forgotten about it. She hadn't expected that 3 days later, Tang Cheng would take the initiative to deliver the flower. Interesting. Her gaze shifted to Wen Huaiyan's unparalleled handsome face. Then she glanced at Tang Cheng, whose shy yet delighted eyes kept sneaking toward him. In an instant, Tang Cheng understood her true intentions. Tang Cheng had set her sights on her child's father. She was blatantly using this as an excuse to get close to Wen Huaiyan, using Tang Cheng as a stepping stone. What a well-played scheme. Did Tang Cheng really think she was so easy to exploit? Tang Cheng let out a displeased snort and unceremoniously issued an order to leave. The flowers have been received. You can go now. Tang Cheng's smile froze for a moment, caught off guard by the abrupt dismissal. Instinctively, she glanced toward Wen Huaiyan. Unfortunately for her, his gaze remained fixed on the tricolor peony, completely ignoring her presence. A wave of frustration surged through Tang Cheng. Why are you looking at Wen Huaiyan? Tang Cheng sneered. He's just a guest. He doesn't get to make decisions here. Stop wasting your effort. I am the master of this peony garden. She lifted her chin and mercilessly exposed Tang Cheng's little schemes. Isn't that right, Wen Huaiyan? Hearing her question, Wen Huaiyan finally shifted his attention from the tricolor peony to Tang Cheng. A faint smile appeared on his lips. You're the master here. It's your call, he agreed readily. Then, as if suddenly realizing something, he added with amusement. But I just noticed that your so-called peony garden doesn't actually have a single peony in sight. Why don't I send some over? Tang Cheng glanced at Wen Huaiyan with satisfaction. As expected, her child's father hadn't let her down. Even better, his well-intended suggestion had conveniently paved the way for her to trap someone else. Seizing the opportunity, Tang Cheng graciously turned down Wen Huaiyan's offer, only to shamelessly throw the burden onto Tang Cheng instead. No need. Didn't Tang Cheng say she cultivated this tricolor peony herself? If she can grow such a rare variety, she must be quite skilled in horticulture. I'll just ask her for more peonies. Once the whole courtyard is filled with them, this place will finally live up to its name as the Peony Garden. With that, Tang Cheng openly and unapologetically demanded peonies from Tang Cheng. For a split second, Tang Cheng's delicate face twisted in frustration. So she's gotten addicted to taking advantage of her. Before she could protest, Wen Huaiyan delivered the final blow. That's a great idea, he said smoothly. Tang Cheng, you and Tang Cheng are such close sisters. You were generous enough to gift her a tricolor peony, so I'm sure you'd be more than happy to cultivate an entire garden's worth for her. Then he turned his gaze toward Tang Cheng, the corners of his thin lips curving ever so slightly. Wouldn't you agree, third Miss Tang? Wen Huaiyan had long noticed the admiration in Tang Cheng's eyes. Without hesitation, he decisively cut off any lingering hopes she might have had. Dealing with Tang Cheng alone was already exhausting. He had to stay on high alert at all times, lest she carelessly go and find his child a stepfather. There was no way he had the time or energy to entertain another woman's affections. Jinshu stood frozen in shock. Everyone in the Grand Nanyang Marquis Manor knew that the fourth Miss had a habit of openly snatching things from the third Mississippi. And yet, the esteemed heir had the audacity to talk about sisterly affection? Had he not just witnessed the fourth Mississippi drive her sister out in front of everyone? How could he spout such blatant lies with a straight face? Jinshu didn't dare glance at her mistress. The third Miss was surely seething by now. Indeed, Tang Cheng was livid. The budding affection she had only just begun to nurture shattered into pieces. She could no longer maintain a pleasant expression. She had always known her fourth sister was shameless, but today she had truly seen the depths of her audacity. And when Huaiyan, whom she had once admired for his noble grace, turned out to be nothing more than an enabler. The two of them weren't even engaged anymore. Yet he still sided with Tang Cheng? She had completely misjudged him. With her fantasy utterly crushed, any lingering fondness she had for Huaiyan disappeared in an instant. Tang Cheng no longer cared to uphold the facade of a gentle and virtuous lady. She must have been out of her mind to step foot into the peony garden. Tang Cheng was nothing but a greedy fool who didn't know when to stop. If she thought she could keep taking advantage of her, she had another thing coming. From now on, she would make sure to steer clear of this place. As for her precious tricolor peony, well, now that it was in Tang Cheng's hands, there was no hope of getting it back. Might as well consider it fed to the dogs. Tang Cheng swallowed the pain of losing her precious tricolor peony, and let out a cold laugh. Young Master One, you must be joking. Tang Cheng and I have always been like water and fire. We despise each other. Our relationship is terrible. This tricolor peony? She had her people threaten me into handing it over. Now that the flower has been delivered, I'll take my leave. Jinshu, we're going. With that, Tang Cheng stormed off with Jinshu in tow, her hurried steps making it look as if she were fleeing in defeat. She was so consumed by anger that she never even noticed the cracked table on her way out. Tang Cheng grinned and gave Huaiyan a thumbs up. Nicely done. Huaiyan smiled humbly. Not at all, this was all thanks to you. The four maids. Huaiyan raised an eyebrow. Need me to send over some peonies? Tang Cheng rejected the offer without hesitation. No need. The flowers in my courtyard are just fine. I'm not looking to replace them. They're just ordinary flowers. What does it matter what's planted? As long as they're neatly trimmed and look nice, that's all that matters. Not worried about the name being misleading? Huaiyan chuckled. After Tang Cheng's interruption, Huaiyan had gained some new perspective. This girl Tang Cheng didn't think like others. She couldn't be judged by conventional standards. He needed to take his time with her. It's just a name for a courtyard. If I ever get tired of it, I can change it. Things don't always live up to their names, so why fuss over it? Tang Cheng was completely unconcerned. The four maids were speechless. Wasn't their mistress always the one making a fuss over everything? That makes sense. Huaiyan agreed. Everyone says fourth Miss Tang is just a pretty airhead, but I'd say that's misleading too. Tang Cheng beamed. You have great taste. The brainless beauty was the original owner of this body. She certainly wasn't. Anyone with a brain can see that. Huaiyan smirked, secretly amused. So Tang Cheng liked hearing compliments? That was a useful thing to remember. The four maids. Huaiyan took a sip of tea, then with great interest teased, Tang Cheng, I just helped you out. Don't I deserve a reward? Tang Cheng was a generous person. With great magnanimity, she pointed at the extravagant three-colored peony. Here, this pot of peonies is yours. Huaiyan. He fell silent for a moment, then met Tang Cheng's gaze. Can I exchange it for something else? Tang Cheng gave him a puzzled look. He had clearly been fascinated by the peony earlier. Was he now hoping for a strengthening elixir instead? She frowned. You want a strengthening elixir? Huaiyan froze for a moment, then simply laid it out. No. Can we get engaged again? Dream on. Tang Cheng turned her head and flatly rejected him. That's not happening. Just take the three-colored peony. It wasn't like she cared. Tang Cheng had given it to her anyway. The four maids, however, felt their hearts ache. That peony could sell for an astronomical price. Wen Huaiyan, as expected, still a no. Not that he was disappointed. He hadn't actually expected a reward in the first place. No need, it was just a small favor, Wen Huaiyan said casually before shifting the topic with a serious tone. Apologies, I left in a hurry today. I'll have the payment for the strengthening elixir delivered to you later. Hearing that he neither wanted anything nor forgot about the payment, Tang Cheng's brief displeasure faded. She waved a hand generously. No need. I already took 1,000 taels of gold from your mother. A person should keep their word and not be too greedy. Could she stop bringing up those 1,000 taels of gold? Wen Huaiyan's lips twitched. Seeing that it was nearly noon and with the engagement already called off, making a new one impossible, he knew it wasn't appropriate to linger any longer. He rose to take his leave. The peony garden fell silent again. Miss, the three-colored peony is an entirely new variety, never seen before. It's rare and incredibly valuable, worth a fortune. Zhenju hurriedly reminded Tang Cheng, fearing she might give it away again. The other three maids nodded in agreement. Tang Cheng was startled. She studied the peony more closely, baffled. It's just 3 colors mixed together. Other than being decorative, does it really have any special value? To Tang Cheng, a flower was only truly valuable if it had uses beyond just looking pretty. The 4 maids nodded in unison. The moment news of this 3-colored peony spreads, it will take the entire capital by storm. Tang Cheng looked incredulous. Was a mere peony really that precious? Still, she wasn't particularly fond of it, but her marquis father might be. Now that her engagement with the Duke's manor was annulled, her father would surely feel guilty and distressed when he returned. She might as well give it to him. Satisfied with her decision, Tang Cheng happily determined the peony's new owner. Leaving the Marquis of Nanyang's estate, Wen Huaiyan glanced back at its grand vermilion gates, then up at the cloudless sky. Without another thought, he mounted his horse and rode away. The future was long. Wen Huaiyan rode his horse through the bustling streets of the capital, unfazed by the curious gazes cast his way. Midway, he ran into 2 of his close friends, the heir of the Marquis of Dingbei and the eldest young master of the Duke of Qi's household. The 2, brimming with excitement, dragged him off to a tea house. Inside a private room, the heir of the Marquis of Dingbei raised his teacup with a broad grin. Come, come. Let's toast with tea instead of wine, to celebrate Huaiyan's escape from misery and freedom from that so-called brainless beauty. Congratulations, congratulations. The eldest young master of the Duke of Qi's household chimed in cheerfully, joining in the celebration. Laughter echoed through the room. Wen Huaiyan, watching his 2 overly enthusiastic friends, felt his handsome face darken instantly. I never wanted to break off the engagement. Do you 2 have any ideas on how I can get engaged to 4th Miss Tang again? The laughter came to an abrupt halt. The heir of the Marquis of Dingbei and the eldest young master of the Duke of Qi's household stared at Wen Huaiyan in shock. Had he lost his mind? What was there to miss about 4th Miss Tang, the arrogant, vain, and brainless so-called beauty? Their eyes darted toward each other, and in an instant, a plan was already forming. The heir of Dingbei Marquis cleared his throat. Huaiyan, I have a great idea. You can use a woman's jealousy to. Wen Huaiyan immediately cut him off. Forget it. That idea is worthless. Tang Cheng had always been unpredictable. For all he knew, if she heard such rumors, she might even cheerfully congratulate him. Just the thought of it made Wen Huaiyan feel stifled and frustrated. Come on, Huaiyan, hear me out. I wasn't finished. The heir of Dingbei Marquis protested. I'm saying we should spread a rumor that another woman is pregnant with your child. That would surely spark 4th Miss Tang's jealousy and competitive spirit. Wasn't she acting all high and mighty just because she carried your child? If she loses that exclusive status, she'll definitely start to panic. Who knows? She might even beg you to get engaged again. His excitement grew as he spoke. This was even more absurd. Wen Huaiyan's expression darkened as he shot him a glare. He should have known better than to expect anything useful from them. The eldest son of the Duke of Qi twitched his lips and cast a disdainful look at the heir of Dingbei Marquis. Su Jingxing, did you leave your brain at home today? What kind of rotten idea is that? Who doesn't know what kind of person fourth Miss Tang is? She used to cling to the fourth prince relentlessly, and even threatened to abort her child for him. If it weren't for the Marquis of Nanyang stopping her, Huayan's child would have been gone long ago. And you really think she'd care whether Huayan got another woman pregnant? She might even use this as an excuse to get an abortion. The eldest son of the Duke of Qi wasn't exaggerating. He had once overheard fourth Miss Tang shamelessly telling her maid that she was destined to marry into the royal family and rise above everyone else. The woman had absolutely no self-awareness, so this scheme would be completely useless against her. So what if she aborts the child? It's not like she's the only one who can bear Huayan's children. Didn't Auntie already spread the word that Huayan is in perfect health? The rumor is everywhere now. The heir of Dingbei Marquis retorted, unconvinced. The eldest son of the Duke of Qi. When Huayan's expression turned as dark as the bottom of a pot, his whole body practically radiating black energy. Gritting his teeth, he said, "My health may have improved, but the issue of my difficulty in producing heirs hasn't been resolved." The heir of Dingbei Marquis was dumbfounded. But Auntie said, "We had an imperial physician examine me yesterday. My mother refuses to believe their diagnosis, and thinks I colluded with them to deceive her. She also went behind my and my father's backs to annul the engagement. By the time I found out and rushed over, it was already too late." When Huayan closed his eyes briefly, his fingers tightening around the teacup, veins faintly visible on the back of his hand. He had no idea why, after unilaterally canceling his engagement to Tang Cheng, his mother had been so eager to spread such a blatant lie. It seemed that ever since his engagement to Tang Cheng was settled, his mother's attitude had changed. The main reason he wanted to reinstate the engagement, aside from not wanting his child to have a stepfather, was to protect his own flesh and blood. Now that the engagement was annulled, who knew how the Marquis of Nanyang would react? Tang Cheng had sworn she would give birth to the child, but what about the Marquis of Nanyang? He had nearly overlooked the man's response in his calculations. Had his mother truly not considered this possibility? When Huayan's gaze darkened, an eerie silence filled the private room. The two men had initially been ready to celebrate after hearing that the Duchess of Zhenguo had spread word of Huayan's supposed recovery, believing that his struggles with fathering heirs were no longer an issue. But now, this was awkward. For Tang fourth Miss to conceive Huayan's child from a single encounter, it wasn't just luck, it had something to do with her physical constitution. She was, in all likelihood, the most suitable woman for him. No matter how arrogant, brainless, or vain she was, if they were in Huayan's position, they would cling tightly to this lifeline as well. Love had nothing to do with it. Moreover, Tang fourth Miss was undeniably beautiful. A woman of her temperament could never become the primary wife of a noble family, but she could bear children, and that alone mattered. Prestigious families valued lineage above all else. Any child she bore could be taken from her and raised separately, ensuring they were properly groomed. Not to mention, she had the unwavering support of her father, the Marquis of Nanyang, who doted on her endlessly. And yet, the Duchess's actions ran completely counter to this logic. On the surface, she seemed to be acting in Huayan's best interests, but under closer scrutiny, her reasoning didn't hold up. A flicker of something unreadable passed through the eyes of the Duke of Qi's eldest son. He wasn't sure if Huayan had realized it yet. Perhaps he had, but he didn't dare dwell on it too deeply. The three men finished their tea in silence before each departed for home. Outside, all of the capital was abuzz with discussion about the one heir's remarkable recovery and the dissolution of his engagement. Public opinion overwhelmingly sided with the Duke of Zhenguo's household, with many saying the annulment was the right decision. Tang fourth Miss was simply unworthy of Huayan. At the Jianan Marquis Manor, Lu Jintong's smile had not faded since she first heard the news. She had known all along that Tang Cheng, that brainless fool, would end up ruining herself. And now, just as expected, the engagement had fallen through. How satisfying. The only pity was that the child in Tang Cheng's womb was still alive. If only it were gone, then she would never have any chance of tying herself to the powerful Duke of Zhenguo's family again. Yao Hong, do you think the one heir's health has truly improved? Lu Jintong narrowed her eyes as she asked. In her past life, when Huayan's condition had been far from good, he had to live a life of restraint to avoid an early death. The Duchess of Zhenguo had once resorted to disgraceful means against him for the sake of her niece, Xie Xuening. Though her plan ultimately failed, it left Wen Huaiyan on the brink of death. Enraged, the Duke of Zhenguo had exiled his wife to a temple, publicly declaring that she had chosen to become a nun to pray for her son's recovery. Because of this, the Duchess had earned widespread admiration. Lu Jintong only knew of this secret because she had once saved a servant who had secretly worked for the Duchess. From that moment on, she had lost all respect for the woman. Yao Hong replied respectfully, "This news came directly from the Duchess of Zhenguo. It shouldn't be false." Lu Jintong let out a mocking laugh, her tone laced with meaning. "I do hope it's true. Because if that were the case, then Tang Cheng's foolish child would be completely irrelevant." But she knew that was impossible. Suddenly, a thought struck her like lightning, and her eyes widened in shock. How could she have forgotten about the Marquis of Nanyang, the man who spoiled Tang Cheng beyond reason? The Duchess of Zhenguo had annulled the engagement. After the Marquis of Nanyang learned of this, he would be furious. And once enraged, he would never allow that foolish daughter of his to give birth to the child. With that thought, Lu Jintong's mood brightened once more. The Marquis of Nanyang had not expected the Duchess of Zhenguo to visit today, much less to abruptly break off the engagement. The entire capital knew exactly what kind of temperament his precious daughter had. The Duchess of Zhenguo had known from the very beginning. So what if Tang Cheng had caused some trouble for that brat Wen Huaiyan? Was that really reason enough to use it as an excuse to call off the marriage? The Duke of Zhenguo's household was utterly insufferable. Even if the Duke himself repeatedly insisted that this was not his decision, what did it matter? The engagement was already broken. All his careful planning for his beloved daughter had gone to waste. This was far from over. Sitting inside his carriage, the Marquis of Nanyang turned the jade thumb ring on his finger, his gaze dark and ruthless. The moment he returned home, he headed straight for the peony garden. The women of the inner courtyard quickly caught wind of this, and their hearts filled with unease. Madame Zhang, however, remained indifferent. She had no time to concern herself with Tang Cheng. Her focus was entirely on her own daughter now. The servants had already informed Madame Zhang that Tang Xian had gone to Peony Garden to see Tang Cheng. Disappointment flickered in her eyes. If Jin Shu hadn't assured her that Xianer had given up on such thoughts, she would have confined her to her courtyard and made her transcribe the admonitions for women as punishment. By now, the Marquis of Nanyang had already arrived at Peony Garden. Tang Cheng's first reaction upon seeing her Marquis father was to present him with a tricolor peony. "Father, look. This is a tricolor peony I got from Tang Xian. Isn't it beautiful? I heard it's very rare." The Marquis of Nanyang stared at the flower in shock, inspecting it over and over again to make sure it truly had 3 colors and wasn't just something his precious daughter had dyed herself. "It is indeed beautiful." Tang Cheng beamed. "I'm giving this tricolor peony to you, father. Do you like it?" "I love it." The Marquis chuckled as he reached out to ruffle her hair, casting an amused glance at his daughter. How could he not see through her little schemes? It was clear that she wasn't the least bit affected by the broken engagement. Relief washed over him. Thinking back to how she had been adamant about getting rid of the child just days ago, he realized that if he had known the Duchess of Zhenguo would end the engagement, he wouldn't have stopped her. But it wasn't too late. "Cheng-er, father won't stop you from aborting the child anymore." "Abortion?" Tang Cheng's almond-shaped eyes widened in shock. The person who had once been the strongest opponent of her abortion was her Marquis father. Now the one supporting it was also him. Back then, when she had suggested breaking off the engagement and finding another father for the child, hadn't he agreed as well? What was going on? "Cheng-er, I was wrong. The Zhenguo's estate is not the best place for you. There's no need to keep this child. The Duke of Zhenguo and his son might be fine men, but with a future mother-in-law like the Duchess, who openly loathed his precious daughter, who knew what kind of torment she would put her through." The Marquis of Nanyang had conveniently forgotten that Tang Cheng was not the kind of person who could endure hardship. "Father, I'm keeping this child." Tang Cheng's expression was firm. In her eyes, abortion was an act of cruelty. Even though she now had the highly coveted ability to conceive easily, making children no longer out of reach, she would not treat this life so lightly. The Marquis of Nanyang was stunned. His precious daughter had once been desperate to get rid of the child, yet now she was adamant about keeping it. Could it be that she had taken a liking to that brat Wen Huaiyan? A sour feeling crept into his heart, making him dislike Wen Huaiyan even more. Cheng'er, the Zhenguo Duke's estate has gone too far. Keeping this child will only invite ridicule and tarnish your reputation. I can't bear to see you suffer. Father, do I even have a reputation left? Tang Cheng looked up at him and asked. The Marquis of Nanyang fell silent. If my reputation is already ruined, what could be worse than this? Tang Cheng stated matter-of-factly. Once again, the Marquis found himself at a loss for words. Father, if I keep this child, will you stop loving me? Tang Cheng's beautiful almond-shaped eyes gazed at him with grievance. Of course not. You will always be my most beloved daughter. The Marquis of Nanyang immediately reassured her. If you want to keep the child, then so be it. But you'll have to cooperate with me and put on a show. Seeing his precious daughter insist on keeping Wen Huaiyan's brat, he felt a pang of jealousy but had no choice but to compromise. Internally, he made another note to settle the score with the Duke of Zhenguo. Tang Cheng's face instantly lit up with a smile as she affectionately clung to his arm, her voice sweet and coquettish. I knew father treats me the best. Tell me, how do you want me to cooperate? The Marquis sighed, a helpless yet doting smile tugging at his lips. In a few days we'll announce to the public that you've lost the child. Since it was all just an act and not real, Tang Cheng couldn't be bothered by other people's gossip. With a carefree nod she agreed. All right. The Marquis of Nanyang smiled in satisfaction. Once the news spread, and the Duke's wife realized she had indirectly caused the loss of her only grandchild, he was eager to see how the Duke of Zhenguo would react. Let them taste the consequences of making his precious daughter suffer. He was certain the Duke's wife would be most pleased with the gift he had prepared for her. As for the truth being exposed in the future, the Marquis of Nanyang decided to leave that problem for another day. The four maids who had been silently blending into the background. Why did it feel like the Marquis' smile was a little cold? You four, go stand guard at the door, he ordered, waving them away as another matter came to mind. As the maids quietly left, the Marquis silently added another mark against Wen Huaiyan in his mental ledger. If it weren't for that brat requesting an imperial physician to examine him, how would His Majesty have taken an interest in his daughter's strengthening tonic? And if that hadn't happened, why would the Emperor suddenly want to see her? Once the maids had exited, leaving only father and daughter in the room, the Marquis finally revealed the news. Cheng'er, tomorrow I will take you to the palace. His Majesty wishes to see you. Tang Cheng pulled her father down to sit beside her on the couch, casually pouring him a cup of tea as she processed his words. The Emperor wants to see me. It must be about the strengthening tonic, right? Tang Cheng spoke with absolute certainty. The Marquis of Nanyang took the teacup from his daughter and sipped leisurely. That's right. There's no hiding the fact that you have the tonic. Bring some with you when we enter the palace tomorrow. Tang Cheng readily agreed. All right. If His Majesty tries the tonic, he'll definitely reward me. Father, what do you think I should ask for as a reward? The Marquis. His precious daughter sure thought far ahead. But right now, the priority was to steer her away from this idea. Ahem, Cheng'er, when it comes to imperial rewards, you take whatever His Majesty bestows upon you. Tang Cheng pouted in disappointment. So, I can't ask for something specific? No. The Marquis of Nanyang shook his head firmly, determined to prevent his daughter from getting any wild ideas about making outrageous demands of the Emperor. Tang Cheng let out a soft "oh," but inwardly, she had already made up her mind to give it a try. Her strengthening tonic was incredibly valuable. If the Emperor simply rewarded her with some gold and silver to brush her off, wouldn't that be a huge loss? By the way, Cheng'er, the Emperor might ask you to refine the strengthening tonic on the spot. Do you know how to handle that? A man is not guilty, but treasuring a jade becomes a crime. The Marquis knew all too well how miraculous his daughter's tonic was. He feared she would recklessly seek the spotlight, drawing too much attention to herself, attention he might not be able to shield her from. A flicker of worry flashed in his eyes. Tang Cheng was quick-witted and immediately understood the underlying meaning in her father's words. She blinked playfully at him and said with a mischievous smile, Don't worry, father. When it comes to refining the strengthening tonic, I can succeed if I want to and fail if I choose to. What do you think? Should I succeed or fail? Hearing her response, the Marquis of Nanyang felt a wave of relief wash over him and chuckled. I think failure would be best, don't you agree, Chenger? Tang Cheng tilted her delicate face slightly, a sly grin playing on her lips. I think so too. Succeeding on the first try would be nothing more than a lucky fluke. What can I say? I just have good luck. The Marquis burst into hearty laughter. Outside the room, the four maids who had been listening exchanged knowing smiles and pressed their lips together to suppress their amusement. Compared to the light-hearted atmosphere in Peony Courtyard, the mood in the Duke of Zhenguo's residence was heavy and suffocating, like the calm before a storm. For the first time, Madame Min witnessed the Duke of Zhenguo in a fit of rage. The elegance that usually graced her face was now laced with unease and guilt. When Huaiyan stood to the side, his expression complicated as he looked at his mother. Madame Min, tomorrow you will take the official matchmaker to the Marquis of Nanyang's residence, and ensure the marriage is reinstated. After venting his anger, the Duke of Zhenguo issued the order in an icy tone. I won't go. Tang Cheng doesn't deserve it. The Duchess's expression changed drastically. She had only just annulled the engagement today. How could she possibly go back tomorrow to arrange it again? How would she keep her dignity? More importantly, she would never allow Tang Cheng to take what rightfully belonged to Xuening. The position of the future lady of the house belonged to Xuening. So what if she's pregnant? Huaiyan has always struggled with fertility. Who's to say the child in her belly is even his? Blinded by rage, the Duchess lost all restraint, slandering Tang Cheng without thinking. When Huaiyan's face remained expressionless, but beneath his sleeves, his fists clenched tightly. The way he looked at his mother now carried a trace of unfamiliarity, even coldness. The Duke's face darkened, his expression thunderous. Silence! The identity of the child in fourth Miss Tang's womb was something he had long since verified beyond any doubt. His disappointment in Madame Min had reached its peak. Since she harbored such disdain for Tang Cheng, then she had no business interfering in the marriage any further. Tang Ping, escort the madam back to her family home tomorrow. Tang Ping, who had remained inconspicuous until now, respectfully acknowledged the order. The Duchess shuddered, snapping back to reality. She stared in disbelief at the Duke of Zhenguo, whose expression was cold and unreadable. Was he truly sending her back to her maiden home, all for the sake of that arrogant, brainless girl who showed no respect for her elders? Being sent back to her maiden home was nearly indistinguishable from being dismissed. The Duchess of Zhenguo panicked. She could not bear to become a laughingstock among the aristocracy, nor could she accept losing her status as the Duchess. For the first time she was forced to lower her head and admit her mistake. But in her heart, her hatred for Tang Cheng had reached its peak. The Duke of Zhenguo, with his striking features reminiscent of Wen Huaiyan, remained unmoved. Madame Min's face turned deathly pale. Without her title as the Duchess of Zhenguo, she would be nothing. All her years of scheming meaningless. At this moment, even her cherished Xuening had faded from her thoughts. No, she still had her son. Madame Min's gaze snapped to him, filled with hope. When Huaiyan's handsome face remained unreadable, his dark eyes cold and unfathomable. Only at times like this did his mother remember him. He had intended to plead for her from the start. This only made it happen a little sooner. Father, please give mother another chance. No matter what, she was still his mother. When Huaiyan could not stand by and watch as his father sent her back to her maiden home. Hearing Wen Huaiyan speak up for her, the Duchess's eyes lit up, as if she had grasped her last lifeline. For the first time she truly felt the Duke's cold ruthlessness, and it sent a chill down her spine. She regretted it now, she had acted too rashly. She never expected the Duke to care so much about fourth Miss Tang's child. Why wasn't it Xuening carrying Huaiyan's child instead? The respect and status the Duke had always granted her had made her forget to be cautious. If she could survive this crisis, Madame Min swore she would be more careful in the future. Step by step she would find another way. The Duke of Zhenguo regarded his only son with a complex expression. For once, he suppressed the fury burning in his chest and gave him a deep, assessing look. His son had always been exceptionally intelligent, possessing both skill and capability. If not for his frail health holding him back. Fortunately, he had recovered. Fourth Miss Tang had given him a grandson, and he had even secured a position for Huaiyan at the Ministry of War. Everything was progressing in a favorable direction. Who would have thought that Madame Min would interfere, overstepping her bounds by unilaterally calling off the engagement with the Marquis of Nanyang's family, sabotaging such a promising future. The Duke had long been disappointed by Madame Min's frequent, clandestine dealings with the other branches of the family, but now she had gone so far as to meddle in the lineage of the Zhenguo household. His patience had reached its limit. Now, with his son pleading on her behalf, the Duke fell into brief contemplation before speaking sternly. Madame Min, for Huaiyan's sake, I will let this go, this time. But let there be no next. The Zhenguo household will not tolerate a mistress who turns against her own family. This was no mere reprimand, it was a grave warning. She must not assume that bearing the Duke's only heir made her untouchable, safe from consequence. To interfere in the matter of succession, she had dared to touch his bottom line. Fourth Miss Tang must marry into the Duke's household. She was nothing more than a spoiled girl, willful and brainless perhaps, but what did it matter? Her tantrums and petty troubles were nothing more than trivial nuisances. Someone like her was simple to understand and easy to control. She was her son's fated benefactor. Because of her, his once looming fate of an early death had been averted. More importantly, her constitution carried the hope for his lineage. The Duke of Zhenguo cast a cold, merciless gaze at Madame Min. She understood the unspoken warning in his words. A shudder ran through her, and the blood drained from her face once more. Thank you, Your Grace, she murmured, lowering her head. Tomorrow, I will personally take the matchmaker to the Marquis of Nanyang's residence. Compared to her title as the Duchess, being ridiculed and losing face was insignificant. As long as she remained the Duchess of Zhenguo, they would still have to flatter her, curry favor with her. As for Fourth Miss Tang, she could deal with her after the child was born. The Duke of Zhenguo cast an impassive glance at Madame Min. I hope you will do as you say. With that, he shifted his gaze to his son, his expression softening slightly. Huaiyan, come to my study. When Huaiyan gave his mother a long, unreadable look before rising to follow his father, Tang Ping left with them. The once lively room now felt vast and empty. The Duchess of Zhenguo let out a breath, her entire body slackening as she collapsed into her chair, drained of strength. At that moment, none of the three in the Duke's household were aware of the Marquis of Nanyang's brewing revenge. That night, while the atmosphere in the Duke's residence remained heavy and oppressive, countless others lay awake in excitement. Yet the very subject of it all, Tang Cheng, slept soundly through the night. At the break of dawn, as the first rays of morning light spilled over the horizon, Tang Cheng rose early to freshen up. Today was the day she would enter the palace. It had been 4 days since her arrival here, and she was finally about to meet the supreme ruler of this feudal dynasty. A slight thrill of excitement coursed through her. She had deliberately chosen an embroidered silk gown woven with gold thread, adorned from head to toe in jade ornaments. With no trace of makeup, her delicate oval face remained strikingly beautiful. Her almond-shaped eyes were bright and clear, her brows sharp with an unmistakable air of pride, radiant, bold, and impossible to ignore. Her 4 personal maids were secretly awed by the sight, especially Zhenju. In the past, her mistress had favored gold jewelry, but now she preferred jade. It seemed jade suited her even more. Zhenju did not dwell on the change. Her mistress had always been unpredictable, never particularly attached to any one thing. Let's go to the main courtyard. Lifting her chin slightly, Tang Cheng strode out of Peony Garden with a commanding presence, her 4 maids and the strengthening potion in tow. The servants of the Marquis of Nanyang's residence quickly lowered their heads in greeting as they witnessed the scene. The Marquis himself hadn't expected his beloved daughter to arrive so early. He had just been preparing to fetch her from Peony Garden when, to his surprise, she appeared on her own radiant, her smile bright and dazzling, clearly eager to enter the palace. The Marquis couldn't help but chuckle in amusement. Madame Zhang took it all in stride, her composure unwavering. Meanwhile, Tang Cheng, who had rushed over upon hearing the news, was utterly stunned at the sight before her. Dressed in full splendor, exuding an air of confidence and dominance, Tang Cheng looked every bit the haughty noble lady with her head held high. Once the initial shock passed, Tang Cheng inwardly shook her head. She never expected Tang Cheng to possess such an intimidating facade. So this is what it means to be all show and no substance. Father, it's getting late. Let's head to the palace, Tang Cheng said sweetly, affectionately linking her arm through her father's. The Marquis of Nanyang chuckled. There's still plenty of time, no need to rush. The emperor wouldn't summon his beloved daughter until after court had adjourned. No matter how eager she was, it wouldn't make a difference. Tang Cheng tugged at her father's arm, drawing out her voice in a playful whine. Father! All right, we're going. The Marquis of Nanyang chuckled, amused. He gave Madame Zhang a slight nod before glancing at his third daughter, Tang Cheng. Remembering the tricolor peony she had cultivated, he actually offered her a rare word of praise. Then, without further delay, he left with Tang Cheng. Tang Cheng's eyes dimmed slightly. Why was her so-called father taking Tang Cheng to the palace? Was it because of the broken engagement with the Duke of Zhenguo's household? What a biased, unfair father. She clenched her teeth in silent resentment. Neither her so-called father nor her so-called mother could be relied upon. It seemed she could only count on herself. Lost in her thoughts, Tang Cheng failed to notice Madame Zhang watching her with a furrowed brow. Shortly after the Marquis of Nanyang and Tang Cheng's carriage departed, another carriage from the Duke of Zhenguo's residence slowly came to a halt at the gates of the Marquis's estate. A crowd of onlookers trailed behind, eager to witness the spectacle. The previous day's uproar over the Duke of Zhenguo's household annulling the engagement had spread like wildfire. Everyone was watching closely, anticipating the Marquis's reaction. Surely, the doting father would retaliate. Yet, before the Marquis could make a move, the Duke's household had once again stirred up trouble. Strangely enough, instead of hostility, the Duchess of Zhenguo had arrived with an official matchmaker and an entire carriage filled with lavish betrothal gifts. What was going on? The gathered crowd erupted into a flurry of whispers, speculation running rampant. Inside the carriage, Lady Min, the Duchess of Zhenguo, heard the hushed discussions outside. The words lodged in her chest, neither able to be swallowed nor spat out. Taking a deep breath, she forcibly steadied her emotions, suppressing the irritation bubbling within her. This time, however, the situation seemed different. Whether it was by the Marquis's orders or mere coincidence, the gate guards, though respectful, did not immediately grant her entry. Instead, they halted her procession and sent someone inside to report her arrival. The gathered onlookers took in the scene with keen interest, their murmurs growing louder. Moments later, the steward of the Marquis of Nanyang's estate emerged. He stepped forward and bowed respectfully toward the carriage, yet his demeanor remained firm. He acted as though he hadn't noticed the conspicuous presence of the official matchmaker. With a polite yet unyielding tone, he declared, "Greetings to the Duchess of Zhenguo. By order of the Marquis, the Zhenguo household is not welcome here. Your Grace, please return." Inside the carriage, Lady Min's face instantly paled, a flicker of panic flashing in her eyes. What should she do? If she couldn't complete the task assigned by the Duke, the consequences would be dire. "Your Grace, please return," the steward repeated, this time with unmistakable finality. Lady Min had initially planned to take advantage of the Marquis's absence at court, prepared to swallow her pride and bow before fourth Miss Tang in order to reinstate the marriage agreement. But now she couldn't even step foot past the gate. Taking a deep breath, she leaned toward her trusted attendant and whispered a few instructions. The elderly maid lifted the curtain and addressed the steward. "Please inform fourth Miss Tang that the Duchess wishes to speak with her." The steward maintained his respectful demeanor as he replied, "Fourth Miss has accompanied the Marquis to the palace to meet His Majesty. Your Grace, please return." Lady Min felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She had not anticipated that the Marquis of Nanyang would take fourth Miss Tang to the palace. With no other choice, she could only turn back. The gathered crowd buzzed with excitement, their curiosity piqued. Speculation spread like wildfire, each rumor more sensational than the last. All of the capital was abuzz with discussions about the Duchess of Zhenguo's strange behavior. At the same time, speculation ran wild over the Marquis of Nanyang's intentions in taking fourth Miss Tang to meet the Emperor. Those who harbored grudges against the Duchess or simply envied her didn't just treat the situation as gossip, but they deliberately fanned the flames, further tarnishing her reputation. Even the steward of the Marquis residence became a hot topic. His unwavering yet firm demeanor, along with his 3-time dismissal of the Duchess, sent a clear message. Marquis Nanyang was firmly standing behind 4th Miss Tang. With such a protective and doting father, it was no surprise that many noble young ladies envied and resented Tang Cheng. Had they been in her place, their families would have long since sent them to a temple to become nuns, or worse, declared them dead from illness. Comparing oneself to others was truly maddening. The jealousy only grew stronger when news spread that the Marquis of Nanyang had personally taken 4th Miss Tang to meet the emperor. Meanwhile, the Marquis household remained indifferent to the swirling rumors. Madame Zhang paid only fleeting attention before dismissing them, while Tang Xian, having given up on her fleeting hopes for young Master 1, no longer cared. What truly unsettled her was the story's deviation from its intended course. She could only hope that the chaos was confined to Tang Cheng's storyline. If everything else collapsed, her narrative advantage would be completely useless. Count Jianan's manner. Miss, the word outside is that the Duchess of Zhenguo brought a matchmaker to the Marquis residence in an attempt to restore the engagement. Yao Hong whispered while massaging Lu Jintong's legs. Who would have thought the situation would turn around in just one day? 4th Miss Tang's luck was simply too good. Miss, do you think the Marquis of Nanyang had a hand in this? Yao Hong deliberately brought up the Marquis of Nanyang. Deep down, she couldn't help but envy 4th Miss Tang for having a father who doted on her so completely. Her own mistress might be intelligent, formidable and always one step ahead, manipulating everyone in Count Jianan manner, seizing control of half its influence. But she was constantly embroiled in schemes and power struggles. Scandals from the manor surfaced one after another, an endless stream of disgrace. Just watching it all was exhausting. And now, her mistress had even dared to target 4th Miss Tang, someone she had no past entanglements with. The maids had been on edge, fearing that one wrong step would cost them their lives. Fortunately, after what happened to Shan Hu, their mistress had exercised rare restraint, ceasing any further moves against Tang Cheng. Still, she insisted on monitoring her every action. Yao Hong silently prayed that her mistress would give up on scheming against 4th Miss Tang altogether. Who else would shield that fool Tang Cheng besides the Marquis of Nanyang? No, perhaps we should add the Duke of Zhenguo to the list. Lu Jintong's face remained cold as she clenched her fists, struggling to suppress the raging jealousy spreading through her chest. Even the Duchess of Zhenguo had humiliated herself by personally coming to renegotiate the engagement with young Master 1. There had to be the Duke of Zhenguo's hand behind this. The Duchess of Zhenguo's actions only reinforced Lu Jintong's belief that the rumors about young Master Wen's miraculous recovery were false. That idiot Tang Cheng's unborn child was the key to why the Duke of Zhenguo valued her so highly. A strange and unsettling feeling gnawed at Lu Jintong. She couldn't shake the thought that Shan Hu had died too soon. Tang Cheng should have drunk that tainted abortion medicine, lost the child and been left barren. That was how things were supposed to unfold, not this living so freely and indulgently. The inexplicable unease lingered in Lu Jintong's heart, refusing to dissipate. She had a sinking premonition that if things continued this way, her revenge would remain out of reach. The thought filled her with frustration and fury. She desperately wanted to get rid of that idiot Tang Cheng's child. But at that moment, oblivious to Lu Jintong's malice, Tang Cheng had already entered the imperial palace with her father, the Marquis. The journey was smooth and unhindered. With a eunuch leading the way, Tang Cheng strolled leisurely beside her father, the Marquis, taking in the sights of the imperial palace with great interest. She even offered casual commentary as if she were on a sightseeing tour, completely unfazed by the fact that she was about to meet the emperor. The eunuch leading them was speechless. This 4th Miss Tang wasn't just slow. She was utterly carefree. Unaware of the eunuch's silent complaints, Tang Cheng admired the grandeur of the ancient palace. It was indeed magnificent, though a bit smaller than she had imagined. What truly caught her attention, however, were the nearby palace maids and older attendants. So rude. They all maintained a facade of respectful composure, but in reality, they were subtly sneaking glances at her, as if assessing her. Did they really think she wouldn't notice? Tang Cheng pursed her lips in mild disdain. Father, this palace is so small, and the walls are ridiculously high, it feels like a prison. It doesn't suit the emperor's noble status at all. He must be so uncomfortable living here. Cough, cough. Clutching the small vial of tonic, the Marquis of Nanyang nearly choked on his daughter's audacious words. The eunuch leading the way stumbled, barely managing to keep his footing. Was this fourth Miss Tang not only thoughtless but also fearless? She actually dared to compare the imperial palace to a prison and claim that the emperor was uncomfortable living there. Did she have a death wish? Chenger, you must never say such things again, the Marquis of Nanyang warned, unable to hold back. The palace was the very symbol of imperial authority. Her words were dangerously blasphemous. If the emperor were to take offense, even he wouldn't be able to protect her. After speaking, the Marquis turned a cold, piercing gaze on the eunuch, his eyes carrying a faint but unmistakable threat. You've been in the palace for many years. You should know what to say and what to forget. This servant heard nothing, nothing at all, the eunuch quickly assured him, cold sweat running down his back. Tang Cheng, however, remained completely unfazed. She simply grinned at the eunuch, flashing all 8 of her neatly aligned teeth. Father, even if this eunuch dares to report me, I can simply deny it and accuse him instead, claiming he harbors malicious intent, slandering me, and attempting to use His Majesty's hand to eliminate the legitimate grandson of the Duke of Zhenguo. Everyone knew that the Duke of Zhenguo had suffered lasting injuries while saving the emperor, which was why his heir, young Master One, was his only descendant. And yet, even that sole heir struggled to produce offspring. Only the leading eunuch and her father had heard her words. There was no concrete evidence. Counterattacking would be easy. Tang Cheng spoke with absolute confidence, the eunuch leading the way. Who would have thought that the supposedly brainless fourth Miss Tang was this shrewd? His heart trembled. Better not provoke her. Better not. The Marquis of Nanyang let out a relieved smile. Just now she had truly given him a fright, but fortunately, his precious daughter knew what she was doing. Still, he took the opportunity to warn her. Tang Cheng obediently accepted his advice. With that, the Marquis continued walking at a leisurely pace, matching his daughter's speed. The leading eunuch dared not rush them. If Tang Cheng hadn't mentioned the legitimate grandson of the Duke of Zhenguo, he would have completely forgotten about it. After all, the fourth Miss Tang looked far too healthy and composed. A pregnancy of just over a month was already precarious for a delicate noblewoman, let alone when she had to walk such a long distance. Inside the imperial study, the emperor had already reviewed a good portion of the memorials. Seeing that the Marquis of Nanyang and his daughter had yet to arrive, he put down the documents and frowned, instructing eunuch Fu, "Go and find out why the Marquis of Nanyang and his daughter have not arrived yet." Eunuch Fu obeyed the order and quickly sent someone to investigate. Not long after, he returned to report. "Your Majesty, the fourth Miss Tang and the Marquis of Nanyang did not travel by carriage. It was by order of the Empress." After delivering the report, Eunuch Fu kept his head lowered, not daring to meet the emperor's gaze. The emperor had personally instructed that, given Tang Cheng's condition, she should be allowed to ride a carriage within the palace. However, the empress, upon learning of this, immediately issued an order forbidding it, citing palace rules. Everyone knew that the empress's family, the House of Cheng'en, held a deep-seated grudge against the Duke of Zhenguo's household. It was clear that this move was aimed directly at Tang Cheng, who was carrying the duke's legitimate grandson. And yet, the empress had justification on her side. The fourth Miss Tang was neither a member of the imperial family, nor the wife of a first-rank official. Her status was too low. She did not qualify. The emperor's expression darkened instantly. The empress had blatantly overridden his order, yet he couldn't openly reprimand her. By the time the Marquis of Nanyang and his daughter arrived at the doors of the imperial study, it was already noon. Tang Cheng rubbed her stomach. She was starting to feel hungry. After Eunuch Fu announced their arrival, the Marquis of Nanyang led Tang Cheng into the study. After completing their formal greetings, Tang Cheng finally laid eyes on the highest authority of this imperial era. As she silently calculated the possibility of using the emperor as her backer, the emperor in turn studied her with interest. He was quite curious about the beloved daughter, whom the Marquis of Nanyang doted on so extravagantly,